So I've always preferred driving for Lyft over Uber, and to me, it just seems like they've always cared more about the driver experience. The big caveat, though, is that I've always gotten more rides and made more money with Uber. So Harry here with the Rideshare Guy, and today I'm going to talk about, are there any real differences between Uber and Lyft right now? So, like I said, I've always preferred driving for Lyft, but at the same time, I always made more money with Uber. And to me, it always seemed like Lyft just cared more about that driver experience, right? Whether it was the tipping, especially when I first signed up back in 2014, Lyft was a little goofier. It was more friendly between passengers and drivers. Some passengers would sit up front, whereas with Uber, it just felt like I was kind of this slave to this passenger. They would make me wait. They would get in the car, not always want to talk to me. Sometimes they would, and I would take them to their destination, right? And that was the company's slogan. Uber's slogan used to be everyone's private driver. And that's sometimes how I felt, but I don't feel like a private driver, right? I want to be someone's sort of more personal driver. I want to have those personal relationships. That's why I do it, right? I don't look at this as like something that's super professional, right? But at the same time, I want to be doing a good job. So, I've always felt sort of a soft spot for Lyft, I guess I would say. But, over the years, I think Lyft has actually cut back on a lot of those programs that made it stand out. They got rid of the mentor program. They got rid of some of these driver community events. Meanwhile, Uber has added a tipping option, right? And they're making big changes and big improvements to the driver experience with their 180 days of change program. So, I really wanted to examine, what are the real differences between these two companies right now? Because I think things have changed a lot. In the past, we surveyed our audience in 2017, and Lyft drivers were significantly more satisfied than Uber drivers, right? 76% actually. We surveyed 1,100 drivers. 76% reported that they were satisfied with their Lyft driving experience compared to just 49% on Uber, right? And like I said, even though many people prefer driving for Lyft over Uber, Uber has always been more reliable when it comes to getting rides, when it comes to making money. And of course, that's what matters most to drivers. So I guess I would say that drivers have always liked Lyft more in the past, and it sort of shows with the surveys and from talking to drivers. But I think Uber's doing a lot right now to change its perception. They're not a complete 180. They still have a lot of ways to go. But in 2016, for example, they didn't do a whole lot to improve the driver experience. They added instant pay. They added destination filter, which were two great features, but they weren't that innovative, right? Nothing special. Lyft and Sidecar were already doing those. Sidecar way back in the day. That's now out of business. Now in 2017, with this 180 days of change program, Uber's adding tipping. They're adding a 24/7 support line. They're doing all these changes to destination filter, arrival times, long trip notifications. I mean, the list goes on. And meanwhile, you sort of have Lyft over there in the corner, not really doing much. Uber had a ton of bad press in the beginning of 2017, and I feel like Lyft didn't do a great job of taking advantage of it. They said, Lyft always says in their interviews and things like that, they want to be number one. They want to overtake Uber. But then, their CEO, for example, John Zimmer, he did this interview with the New York Times where he said, oh, Uber's down. They're not doing too well. We don't want to kick them while they're down. Well, I hate to break it to you, but if you want to get to that number one spot, you sort of have to kick them when they're down. Now, that doesn't mean Lyft, is completely a nobody, right? They're still a $9 billion company. They have a ton of great people working for them, and they are competitive with Uber in some markets, but I don't see them really going and taking that market share from Uber anytime soon. I think Uber's still going to be that busy company, going forward. So I guess I would say the real difference right now between these companies, they're becoming more and more similar, right? A lot of the features, a lot of the services, right, are very similar. Even the company culture, right, is becoming more and more similar. Uber's starting to care more about drivers, whereas Lyft, not that they're not caring more about drivers, but it's just, Uber is now caring more. And so these two companies are even more similar there. This is really becoming more of a commodity product, And so I think that, on this driving side, that's what we see with Uber and Lyft. Uber is still dominant, but these companies are getting more and more similar. If we look at a few specific things, like with rates, for example, if Uber raises rates or lowers rates, Lyft is usually very quick to follow. Both companies charge very similar rates in almost every single city. They're taking similar strategies with things like self-driving cars. There are a few differences here and there. For example, like with Uber Pool and Lyft Line pays drivers, the same rates as regular Lyft, whereas Uber Pool is actually paying a little bit less than regular Uber rates, even though Uber is testing higher rates in certain cities right now. Sign-up bonuses, I think this is one area where Lyft clearly has the better sign-up bonus program, because they're now now paying on a per ride. So let's say they offer you a $500 bonus for doing 100 trips. You actually get $5 every time you do a ride now, whereas with Uber, they've moved to a guaranteed earnings model, which sounds similar because they might have a $500 for 50 rides offer too, but it's guaranteeing that you'll earning that, right? It's not a bonus on top. So if you go out and do 50 rides and make $490, Uber's only going to pay you 10 extra dollars to bring you up to 500. So there's still some differences. There's some things that you can find here and there, but I think for the most part, generally, these companies seem to be getting more and more similar. Now, the one big thing that I see, though, is that Lyft is still number 2, right? Lyft is a huge company, and they've done a lot, but I mean, relative to Uber, Uber is massive, right? They're doing millions more rides per day, right? Have probably 1 million or 2 million more drivers than Lyft. And I think that that really means, what that means for drivers is that it actually, we want competition, right? We want Uber and Lyft to always be competing, because what we've seen, it didn't always work out so well in the early days, but now these companies are competing for drivers, right? Improving the experience because, Uber sees what Lyft is doing, they improve, right? Uber's been making a lot of positive changes. I would expect Lyft to go out and make a lot of those positive changes too. And all of that is ultimately going to help that driver experience. So I know that for me, I'm big on using apps like Maestro because obviously that allows me to do Uber and Lyft. And I sort of sometimes like to give Lyft the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I go online with Lyft first, for example, and give them a minute or two to get a ride before I'll go and add Uber. And I think doing little things like that, because Lyft is number 2 and because we want to promote competition, I think that's definitely a good way to handle things going forward. So if you guys have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear your feedback too. Let me know, what do you think is the big difference between Lyft and Uber in 2017? And if you like this video, feel free to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and look forward to hearing from you. All right, stay safe out there.